She had been walking for hours, the snow crunching softly beneath her boots. The cold air burned her cheeks, but she liked that feeling. It made her feel alive. She had come here to escape everything. The noise of the city, the busy streets, and the loud voices in her head. The mountain was quiet, lonely, and wild. Just what she needed. The sky was a soft shade of blue, and the sun was low, sending long shadows across the white snow. She knew she should turn back soon. The weather could change quickly here. But she was curious, and curiosity had always been a part of her. She liked to explore places no one else dared to go. She looked around, trying to find the trail again. The trees around her were tall and thin, their branches heavy with snow. But something was wrong. The path she had been following had disappeared. There was no clear way forward or back. A cold wave of worry ran through her chest. How had she lost the trail? She had been so careful. She took a deep breath and told herself not to panic. She could find her way. She had to. But the mountain felt different now, darker, almost watching her. The silence was too deep. No birds, no animals, nothing. Then she saw it. A small cabin, hidden behind a clump of trees and half covered by snow. It looked old, made from rough logs and stones, like it had been there for many years. She didn't know who had built it or why it was so far from any road or town. The windows were dirty and the door looked like it hadn't been opened in a long time. Her heart beat faster. Part of her told her to keep walking, to leave this place and find help. But another part, the part that loved stories and mysteries, wanted to know who lived here. Maybe someone was inside, someone who could help her. She stepped closer, her breath making little clouds in the cold air. She knocked gently on the door. There was no answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Just as she was about to turn away, the door creaked open a little. A dark shadow moved inside. She froze, unsure what to do. But then a voice came out, low and rough. "Who's there?" it said. She swallowed hard but found her voice. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm lost and need help." The door opened wider and she saw a man standing there. He was tall and strong, with wild hair and a beard that covered most of his face. His clothes were dirty and torn, and his eyes were dark and deep, like he had seen many hard years. But what caught her attention most was the chain around his ankle. It was thick and rusty, fastened to the stone wall inside the cabin. He was a prisoner, a man in chains in the middle of nowhere. She looked at him, then at the chain, and felt a strange mix of fear and pity. Who was he? Why was he chained here? And why hadn't anyone come to free him? The man looked at her carefully. His eyes were sharp, full of anger and pain. But there was also something else, a hint of hope maybe, or curiosity. "I'm not dangerous," she said softly. "I just need shelter for the night." "The storm is coming," he hesitated. Then with a slow nod he stepped aside and let her in. Inside the cabin the air was cold and smelled of smoke and old wood. There was a small fire burning in the stone fireplace, and the walls were covered with animal skins and tools. It was a simple place, but it felt alive. She sat down on a wooden stool, wrapping her arms around herself. The man didn't say much. He sat on the floor near the fire, staring into the flames. She tried to make small talk, asking his name, but he stayed silent. She understood. He was not used to talking, and maybe he didn't trust her yet. Outside, the wind began to howl. Snowflakes tapped against the window like tiny drums. The storm was coming, just like she had feared. She knew she couldn't leave now. The man was her only chance to survive the night in this frozen mountain. So, she stayed and listened. Slowly, the silence between them began to fill with small sounds. The crackle of the fire, the soft scraping of the man moving chains, the careful steps of a woman learning to trust the unknown. By dawn, the storm had passed. The sun rose over the white peaks, casting golden light on the cabin. She looked at the man again, and for the first time he looked back without fear. In that quiet moment she understood something. This mountain man was not just a prisoner of chains. He was a prisoner of his own story, and maybe, just maybe, she was the key to setting him free. She woke up to the smell of fresh wood smoke. For a moment she didn't know where she was, but as her eyes adjusted to the dim light of the cabin, the memory came rushing back. She had come to the mountain for solitude, but she hadn't expected this. A man chained in a small cabin, a prisoner in the wilderness. She glanced over at him. He was still sitting by the fire, his rough, calloused hands resting on his knees. She sat up slowly. careful not to disturb him. The storm had passed, but the snow outside was thick and uninviting. It seemed like the mountain had swallowed the world whole, leaving only them and the wind. She wasn't sure how long she had slept, but it didn't matter. The strange quiet of the place kept her there, rooted to the moment. She rubbed her eyes and stood up, stretching her stiff limbs. Her body felt sore from the cold, and she could see her breath in the air. The man didn't move, but she noticed that his eyes were on her, watching her every move. He hadn't spoken much the night before. He wasn't rude, just distant. There was a wariness in his gaze, like he wasn't sure if she was a friend or a threat, and who could blame him? She took a few steps toward the fire, the warmth wrapping around her. She crouched down and added a few logs. The crackling sound filled the space, the only noise in the otherwise still cabin. The man shifted, his chains clinking softly as he moved. His eyes never left her. "Are you hungry?" she asked, trying to break the silence. She didn't know why she offered. Maybe she just wanted to keep the conversation going, to fill the empty air between them with something. Anything. It felt awkward to be in such close quarters with someone who said so little. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the fire as though considering whether it was worth responding at all. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough like gravel, but there was a strange gentleness in it. "I can't remember the last time I had a meal," he said, his voice low. Her heart tightened at his words, but she tried not to show it. "Well, I'm sure I can find something to eat. There's always something around here." She stood up and began to look around the small cabin, searching for supplies. The shelves were sparse, mostly old jars of dried herbs and a few pieces of meat wrapped in cloth. A small pot was hanging by the fire, and some fresh snow was melting in it. She wasn't sure what she could cook with so little, but she would figure something out. She grabbed the pot and set it on the fire, adding a few pieces of dried meat. It wasn't much, but it would be enough for them both. As she worked, she could feel his eyes on her, not in a threatening way, but with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "Why are you here?" he asked suddenly. The question was blunt, no hesitation in his voice. She paused, looking over at him. "I was just hiking. I lost my way. I wasn't planning on being here, but the storm trapped me." He nodded as though that made sense. "And now you're stuck." It wasn't a question, more of a statement of fact. She didn't answer right away. It felt strange to explain, especially to someone who had been stuck here for so long. "Yeah," she said finally. "Guess so." The silence settled again, and she focused on the food, the heat of the fire keeping the cold at bay. She could feel the weight of his gaze, though, steady and unyielding. It was as though he was trying to figure her out, piece by piece. But it didn't feel judgmental. It felt almost like he was studying her out of curiosity, like he had seen so little of the world beyond these walls that anything was a mystery to him. She didn't mind the silence now. It wasn't as uncomfortable as it had been when she first arrived. There was something calming about the quiet here, something raw and unfiltered. "So who are you?" she asked, looking over at him. She had avoided asking him directly last night, but now, after a whole day in the same space, she couldn't help herself. His eyes flicked to her, and for a moment, he didn't answer. He just stared at the fire, the glow from the flames dancing across his face. His hands tightened around his knees, and his expression shifted. It was like he was bracing himself for something, or maybe he was trying to decide if he should trust her. "I'm nobody," he said finally, his voice quieter now, "just a man who got stuck in the wrong place." She raised an eyebrow, confused by the response. "The wrong place? You mean here?" He nodded slowly. "I used to be from a town a long time ago. Things went wrong. It's better if you don't know the details." The sadness in his voice caught her off guard. She didn't push him further. There was something about the way he said it, like he had locked away part of his past, like he was afraid that if he said too much it might all come rushing back, too painful to bear. They ate in silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. The food was simple, but it warmed them both. She tried to imagine what his life had been like, what had happened to him. But every time she asked herself, she came up with more questions than answers. After they finished eating, she cleaned up, pushing the empty bowls aside. The cabin was small, and the walls seemed to close in as the afternoon light began to fade. She could feel the weight of the hours ahead of her. She didn't know what to do next, whether to try and leave or stay. But there was a strange pull here, a feeling that maybe she was meant to stay. A little longer. He stood up then, his chains clinking with each movement. He stretched his arms and she could see the muscles in his back shift beneath his worn shirt. The man was big, tall and broad-shouldered, a stark contrast to the fragile feeling she had when she entered the cabin. He wasn't just a prisoner, he was a survivor. "I don't know if you can help me," he said, turning toward her, "but I've been stuck here for a long time, longer than I can remember." She looked at him, her heart softening. "I'm not sure I can fix things, but I'll try. I'm not going anywhere right now." He studied her for a moment, his gaze searching hers, and for the first time, he gave a slight nod. "All right, maybe. Maybe you can help me find out what happened. Maybe you can help me find a way out." Her chest tightened at his words. She didn't know what he meant exactly, but something about the way he said it made her feel like she had a purpose here, like she wasn't just some stranger lost in the mountains. She was part of something bigger than herself. She glanced at the door, the snow still falling outside. She knew that, in a way, she had already made her choice. Whether she liked it or not, she was part of this man's story now. And maybe, just maybe, she could help him find the answers he needed. And in the process, find something she had been looking for all along. The days passed slowly in the small cabin high in the mountains. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing everything in white. The wind howled around the little shelter, but inside, there was warmth from the fire and something new, a fragile connection forming between the woman and the man in chains. She had learned his story, piece by piece. In quiet moments by the fire and during the long, cold nights, he told her of a town far away, a place where people whispered about him with fear and anger. He was accused of a terrible crime, something violent and dark, but he said he was not guilty. The truth was buried beneath lies and fear, and no one had ever tried to find it. He had run into the mountains to escape the cruelty, hoping the cold and isolation would protect him. Instead, he had become a prisoner of the wilderness itself. The chain around his ankle was a cruel reminder of the past, a punishment from a man who called himself a hunter, but was more like a jailer. The woman listened carefully, never interrupting. She could see the pain behind his words, the weight of years spent alone and the fear of being forgotten. Yet there was also strength, a fierce will to survive that had kept him alive all this time. One morning, after the fire had died down to glowing embers, she found an old journal lying under a pile of broken wood near the back wall. The pages were yellowed and fragile, but the writing was still clear. She handed it to him gently, and his eyes widened with surprise. "That belonged to my father," he said softly. "He was a good man before everything fell apart." She watched as his fingers traced the worn cover, a flicker of something tender passing through his eyes. The journal was a piece of his past, something real and true in a world full of shadows. Over the next few days, they read the journal together. It told stories of better times, of a family, a home, and hopes for the future. But there were also warnings of trouble coming, of people turning against each other, and of the secrets that would change everything. As they pieced together the story, the woman realized that the man's life had been torn apart, not just by the crime he was accused of, but by something deeper, a betrayal that ran through the town like a poison. They spoke little about their own lives. The woman kept her past quiet, the hurt she carried hidden behind a soft smile. But the man sensed her pain, and sometimes, late at night, he would reach out a hand across the fire to touch hers, a simple gesture that said, "You're not alone." One evening, as the snow fell gently outside, the man finally spoke about the chain around his ankle. "I've tried to break it many times," he said, his voice low, "but it's strong and the lock is old and rusted. It's more than just metal. It's a reminder, a prison without walls." She looked at him, her heart aching. "Maybe it's time to break free." He shook his head. "I don't know how. And I'm scared." She smiled softly. "We'll figure it out together." The trust between them grew, small and steady like the firelight. She began to think about how to help him, to find a way to unlock those chains and unlock his life. One afternoon, she searched the cabin again and found an old box hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside there was a heavy iron key, rusted but still strong. Her heart leapt. "This might be it," she whispered, showing it to him. He stared at the key in disbelief. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "You found it," he said simply. That night, Under the glow of a fading moon, she took the key and carefully unlocked the chain around his ankle. The lock gave way with a soft click and the heavy metal fell to the floor. He flexed his foot, feeling the freedom for the first time in years. Tears filled his eyes, and he looked at her with a gratitude deeper than words. But freedom came with new fears. The world outside was still dangerous. The past waited for him beyond the mountain, and he wasn't sure he was ready to face it. She held his hand and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Together, they stepped outside the cabin into the cold mountain air. The snow stretched out like a blank page, and for the first time, they felt the possibility of a new story, one they could write together. The snow had stopped falling, but the mountain was still covered in a thick white blanket. The sky was clear and the cold air felt sharper than before. The woman and the man stood outside the cabin looking out at the endless stretch of wilderness. He was free now. The heavy chain was gone from his ankle. For the first time in years, he could move without the weight of metal holding him back. But freedom was not just about breaking chains. It was about facing what came next. They knew they couldn't stay in the cabin forever. The mountain was beautiful but also dangerous. The man's past was waiting down the slopes, in the town where people whispered his name with fear and anger. He had to face that past if he ever wanted to live without hiding. The woman packed what little food and supplies they had. She wrapped a warm scarf around her neck and tied her boots tight. She wasn't sure what would happen when they reached the town, but she knew they would face it together. The man watched her silently. His eyes held a mix of fear and hope. He wasn't sure if the people would believe him or if they would want to hurt him again. But her presence gave him courage, a quiet strength he hadn't felt in a long time. They began their journey down the mountain. The snow was soft beneath their feet and the cold wind followed them like a shadow. The path was steep and rocky, but they moved carefully, step by step. The woman kept looking back, making sure he was okay. He was slow but steady. As they walked, the man told her more about the town. He said it had once been a place of hope and hard work, where people lived close to the earth and to each other. But fear had grown like a dark cloud, turning neighbors into strangers, friends into enemies. He had been blamed for something he did not do, a terrible crime that no one really understood. The truth had been hidden, lost under layers of lies and fear. He had run into the mountains to escape the pain, but the mountain had become a prison instead. The woman listened without judgment. She didn't try to solve his problems or promise easy answers. She just walked beside him, letting him know he was not alone. After days of travel, they finally reached the edge of the town. It was small and worn with empty streets and quiet houses. The people looked at them with curiosity and caution. Some whispered as they passed. The man's heart pounded in his chest. They found a small cafe and the woman pushed open the door. The warmth inside was a shock after the cold outside. They sat down quietly at a table near the window, watching the faces outside. The woman pulled out her phone and began to search for old news articles about the crime. She found stories filled with anger and fear, but also hints of questions left unanswered. The case had never been fully closed. Evidence had disappeared and witnesses had changed their stories. She showed the man what she had found. "This isn't the whole truth," she said softly. "We need to find more." They began to ask questions carefully and quietly. They talked to people who remembered the past, gathering pieces of the story like puzzle parts scattered in the wind. Some were helpful, others were afraid. But slowly, the truth began to emerge. The man learned that some people had been threatened to stay silent. Others had lied to protect themselves or those they loved. The real story was darker than he had imagined, but it was finally coming to light. One day, after weeks of searching, the man decided to face the court. The woman stood by his side, holding his hand as they walked into the building. Reporters and townspeople filled the room, their faces a mixture of anger, curiosity, and disbelief. He told his story, simply and honestly. He spoke of the mountain, of the years alone, of the fear and the hope. The woman shared what she had found, the missing evidence, the witnesses who had changed their minds. The room was silent. Some people stared in shock, others shook their heads. But the truth was clear. The charges against the man were dropped. He was free, not just from the chains on his ankle, but from the shadow that had followed him for so long. Outside the courthouse, the woman leaned close and whispered, "Please marry me." It was quiet. just for him to hear. He looked at her, surprised, and then smiled, a smile full of hope. A new beginnings. They walked away from the town hand in hand, ready to build a new life together, free at last. The days after the court decision were quiet, but full of change. The mountain man and the woman walked side by side through a world that suddenly felt different. The chains were gone, but so were the heavy shadows that had hung over his life for so long. It was as if a new chapter was beginning, one filled with hope and possibility. The town slowly started to change too. Some people still whispered and stared, but others began to see him differently, not as a prisoner or a criminal, but as a man who had been wronged and had finally found his voice. The woman was there every step of the way, steady and strong, helping him face the past and build a future. They found a small house on the edge of town, one with a garden where wildflowers grew in the summer. It was simple but warm, a place they could call home. They worked together to fix it up, painting walls and clearing the yard. For the first time, the man felt something he hadn't in years: peace. The nights were the hardest. Memories still came in waves, of cold nights alone on the mountain, of fear and loneliness. But she never let him face those nights alone. She would hold him close, whispering stories of hope and light until the darkness faded. Slowly, they began to talk about dreams, things they had both given up on but now dared to imagine again. The man wanted to help others who had been hurt by fear and lies, to make sure no one else would suffer like he had. The woman dreamed of writing, of telling stories that would bring people together instead of tearing them apart. They planned a small gathering in the garden one warm evening. Friends they had made in town came to listen and share. The man spoke about his journey and the mountain, the chains, the fight for truth. The woman read from her writing, words full of kindness and understanding. It was a night full of laughter and tears, of broken walls and new bridges. People who had once been strangers hugged and talked, finding common ground in their shared humanity. One evening, as the sun set in a soft orange sky, the woman took the man's hand. She looked into his eyes, steady and bright. "Will you marry me?" she whispered again, this time with the world as their witness. He smiled, his heart full. "Yes," he said simply, "I will." Their wedding was small but beautiful, held in the garden surrounded by the people who had helped them heal. There were no grand speeches or fancy clothes, just love and hope shining brighter than the sun. The man looked at her during the ceremony, seeing not just a partner but a light that had guided him through the darkest times. The woman saw in him a strength and kindness she had never known before, a soul that had been broken but was now whole. After the ceremony, they danced under the stars, their laughter mixing with the gentle night sounds. The mountain was far behind them now, but its lessons stayed close. Lessons of courage, trust, and the power of kindness. Life was not perfect. There were still hard days and moments of doubt. But they faced those days together, knowing that freedom was more than just the absence of chains. It was the courage to love, to forgive, and to believe in new beginnings. The man kept a small stone from the mountain in his pocket, a reminder of where he had been and how far he had come. The woman wrote stories about their journey, stories she shared with others who felt lost and alone. Together, they built a life full of light, healing, and hope. The mountain man was no longer a prisoner. He was a man who had found freedom in love and truth, and that freedom would never be taken away again. Life after the wedding was a quiet kind of happiness, but not without its challenges. The man and the woman had found freedom and love, but they both knew that healing was a slow process. The past still whispered sometimes, and the world around them wasn't always kind. Yet they faced everything together, step by step, day by day. The man spent many mornings walking in the early light, breathing in the fresh air as the town slowly woke up. The mountain, once a prison, was now a memory, a hard one but a necessary part of his story. Sometimes he carried the small stone from the mountain in his pocket, feeling its smooth weight as a reminder of how far he had come. The woman, meanwhile, poured her heart into writing. She wrote about their journey, about trust and hope, about the power of kindness to heal wounds that no one else could see. Her words began to spread quietly in the town, reaching people who needed to hear them. They both wanted to give back, to make the world better, especially for those who had been hurt or left behind. The man started meeting with others who had been misunderstood or judged unfairly. sharing his story to show that people could change and deserve second chances. The woman helped by telling those stories, weaving them into the larger story of the community. Slowly, the town began to change. Walls built by fear and suspicion started to crumble, replaced by connections built on understanding and compassion. Neighbors who once avoided each other now shared meals and stories. The garden where the wedding had been held became a place for gatherings, a symbol of new beginnings. But healing was not a straight path. There were moments of doubt, times when the man's old fears crept back in. Sometimes when the wind howled just right or the sky darkened with a storm. He felt small again, like the mountain was calling him back, reminding him of the loneliness he once knew. In those moments, the woman was always there. She would take his hand, look into his eyes, and remind him of the strength he had found. "You are not alone," she would say softly. "We are stronger together." Their love grew deeper through these struggles. It wasn't perfect or easy, but it was real. They learned to listen, to forgive, and to support each other in ways words couldn't fully express. One spring morning, as the first flowers began to bloom in their garden, the man woke to a quiet peace. The weight of the past felt lighter, replaced by the promise of the future. He looked over at the woman sleeping beside him and felt grateful, not just for her, but for the journey that had brought them together. They spent that day walking through the town, greeting old friends and new faces. People smiled at them, their eyes warm with acceptance. The man noticed how far he had come, not just from the chains that had once bound him, but from the fear and silence that had held him captive for so long. That night, as they sat by the fire in their home, the man spoke quietly. "I never thought I would feel free like this. Not just from the chains, but from the past. You helped me find that." The woman smiled and reached for his hand. "You found it inside yourself. I just helped you see it." They talked late into the night about dreams for the future, of helping others, of building a life filled with meaning and joy. They knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but they were ready to face it together. Their story became a quiet inspiration in the town, a reminder that even the darkest nights can give way to dawn. The man who had once been called savage, a prisoner of fear and judgment, was now a man of hope and love. And the woman who whispered, "Please marry me," had helped free more than just a man. She had helped free a soul. The seasons changed again, and with them came new challenges and moments of joy. Life was unfolding in ways neither of them had expected, but both felt ready to meet whatever came next. The man and the woman had built a quiet home together, a place filled with warmth, laughter, and healing. The man had started working in the town's small community center. It was a place where people came to learn, to share their stories, and to support each other. He found himself drawn to those who felt lost or judged, just like he had been. Sitting with them, listening to their fears and hopes, he saw his own past reflected in their eyes. The woman helped him at the center. She organized gatherings where people could come together without fear, where they could speak honestly and find common ground. Her writing had grown too. She began publishing stories about hope and second chances in the local newspaper, giving voice to those who needed it most. Their work wasn't easy. Some people resisted change. There were moments when old fears and anger flared up, threatening to undo everything they had built. But they faced these moments with patience and kindness, knowing that real healing takes time. One afternoon, the man received a letter from someone he hadn't expected to hear from, the man who had once chained him in the mountains. The letter was brief but sincere. It spoke of regret and the hope for forgiveness. The man showed the letter to the woman. They talked long into the night about what to do. Forgiveness was hard, but holding on to anger was harder. They decided to meet with the man, not to reopen old wounds, but to begin healing. The meeting was quiet and tense at first. The man who had once been a jailer looked smaller now, his anger softened by years of regret. The man who had been chained listened, his heart cautious but open. The woman stayed close, her presence a reminder that kindness could break through even the hardest walls. By the end of the meeting, something shifted. There were no promises of friendship or easy answers, but a step toward peace. Forgiveness, they knew, was a journey, not a single moment. Life continued to unfold, full of ups and downs. The man and the woman faced challenges together, times when the past threatened to pull them back, when doubts crept in, or when the world felt too heavy. But their love was a steady light, guiding them through the darkness. They spent evenings sitting by the fire talking about their dreams. They dreamed of traveling, of seeing the world beyond the mountains and the town. They dreamed of a future where no one would have to live in fear, where kindness was stronger than judgment. One spring morning, the woman woke to find the man standing outside, holding a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a tiny kitten, eyes wide with curiosity. They laughed and named her Hope. Hope became a part of their lives, a small living reminder that even after the hardest winters, life finds a way to bloom. The garden outside their home flourished too. They planted flowers and vegetables, watched bees and butterflies return, and felt the rhythm of the seasons in their bones. The garden became a gathering place, a symbol of growth and renewal. As the years passed, the man's story reached beyond their town. People who had once judged him began to listen and understand. His journey became a symbol of courage and resilience, a reminder that no one is defined by their past, and that love and truth can set anyone free. The woman's writing inspired many, touching hearts and opening minds. Together, they worked to build a community where fear was replaced by hope, and chains, whether real or invisible, were broken. One quiet evening, as they sat watching the stars, the man took the woman's hand. "Thank you," he said softly, "for saving me, for believing in me." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. "We saved each other." They knew their story was far from over. Life would bring new challenges, but they were ready. Together they had found freedom, not just from chains, but from fear, anger, and loneliness. And in that freedom, they found something stronger than anything else: hope. Life continued to change in ways both gentle and unexpected. The man and the woman had learned to live not just with their pasts, but because of them. Their days were filled with small moments: quiet conversations over breakfast, walks through the garden as the sun warmed the earth, and evenings spent dreaming by the fire. The man found comfort in the routines they built. The community center where he worked had become a place of healing for many. He saw faces marked by pain and fear, but also by hope. Each person's story reminded him of his own journey, of being trapped by chains that were not always visible. He learned to listen with patience and without judgment. Sometimes people would come to him seeking advice. Other times they simply needed someone to sit with them in silence. The woman was there too, organizing events that brought people together: picnics in the park, storytelling nights, and workshops about forgiveness and courage. Together, they had become a quiet force of change in the town. One day, while walking through the market, the man spotted a young boy sitting alone on a bench, looking lost and afraid. The boy's eyes held a sadness that touched something deep inside the man's heart. He sat beside the boy and gently asked if he wanted to talk. The boy nodded, and slowly he shared his story. A story of fear, rejection, and loneliness. The man listened, recognizing the pain from his own past. He told the boy about the mountain, about chains and freedom, about hope and the power of kindness. The boy's eyes brightened, and for the first time in a long while, he smiled. The woman found them later, and together, they invited the boy and his family to the community center. Over time, the boy began to heal, surrounded by people who cared. It was moments like these that reminded the man and woman why they had chosen to fight for truth and love. The mountain was no longer a place of fear. It was a memory that fueled their strength to help others. As the years passed, the couple's love deepened, growing stronger through every challenge and triumph. They celebrated simple joys: a first bloom in the garden, the laughter of new friends, the quiet peace of a shared evening. They also faced loss and sadness. Friends moved away, and some days the weight of the past felt heavy again, but they never gave up. Their bond was a steady light, guiding them through dark times. One autumn evening, the woman found a letter tucked under their door. It was from someone they hadn't heard from in years, a family member of the man's from far away. The letter was filled with warmth and an invitation to visit. They talked about the visit for weeks. It was a chance to reconnect with a part of the man's past he had left behind. The woman was excited too, eager to meet the people who had shaped his early years. When the day came, they traveled together, stepping into a world that was both familiar and strange. The reunion was filled with tears and laughter, stories shared and old wounds touched gently with new understanding. The man felt whole in a way he never had before, surrounded by family and love. The woman saw the joy in his eyes and knew this was another step in their journey, not just away from the past but toward a future filled with hope. Back home, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. They continued to work in the community, their efforts touching more lives than they had ever imagined. Their story became a beacon, a reminder that no one is alone, no matter how dark the night. One cold winter night, as snow fell softly outside, the couple sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets. The man looked at the woman, his eyes shining with gratitude and love. "We have come so far," he said quietly, "from the mountain to here." She smiled, reaching for his hand. "And we have so much more to do." Their journey was far from over. There were still mountains to climb, not the ones made of rock and snow, but those of fear, doubt, and pain. But they knew they would face them together, with open hearts and steady hands. The mountain man, once chained and alone, had found freedom in the kindness of one person who whispered words of hope and love. And together, they built a life that would shine brightly for many years to come. The rhythm of life settled into a steady beat for the man and the woman. Seasons came and went, each bringing new challenges and new joys. Together they faced each day with quiet courage and deep love. The past still whispered sometimes, but it no longer held power over them. The community center became a place where healing happened every day. The man continued to meet with people who were struggling, those burdened by pain, fear, or loneliness. He shared his story openly now, not as a tale of suffering, but as a beacon of hope. The woman's writing grew deeper and more powerful. She told stories of people like them, those who had been broken but found strength through kindness and connection. Her words traveled beyond their small town, touching hearts in places she had never imagined. Together they held workshops and gatherings that encouraged people to listen and understand one another. They taught that every person has a story worth hearing, and that forgiveness and love can break the heaviest chains. One afternoon, the man was helping to set up for a storytelling night at the center when a woman walked in hesitantly. She looked tired and unsure, carrying the weight of her own struggles. The man greeted her with a warm smile and a gentle question, inviting her to share her story. As she spoke, tears filled her eyes. She told of hardships, mistakes, and the pain of being judged. The room grew quiet, the other listeners holding space with kindness. When she finished, the man spoke softly. "Your past does not define you. There is always a way forward." The woman who had come with him nodded in agreement, her eyes full of understanding. "We have been where you are, and we are here with you now." That night, the center was filled with hope. Stories like hers reminded everyone that healing is a journey shared by many. Outside the center, the garden bloomed brighter each year. The man and the woman tended to it with care, watching the flowers grow and the bees return. The garden became a symbol of their journey, something once barren, now full of life. They welcomed visitors often, sharing tea and stories beneath the shade of the old tree. Children played nearby, laughter ringing through the air. The mountain, once a place of fear and isolation, now felt distant, a memory softened by time and love. Their home was simple but filled with warmth. Walls covered in pictures and memories, books stacked high, and the quiet hum of daily life. They found joy in small moments, a shared meal, a sunrise walk, a quiet evening by the fire. One day the man received a letter from a young woman in a nearby town. She had heard their story and wanted to meet. She worked with people who had been trapped by fear and isolation, much like he once was. They arranged to visit her, bringing lessons and stories to help others find their way. The trip was a new adventure, an opportunity to expand the circle of kindness and hope. The man and the woman found joy in sharing their experience, knowing that each life touched was a step toward a world more gentle and understanding. Back home, winter arrived with soft snow and quiet nights. They spent long evenings wrapped in blankets, reading and talking about dreams. Sometimes the past would visit in the form of old fears or memories, but they faced them with open hearts. They dreamed of building a center for healing, a place where anyone could come to find peace. They imagined a community where no one would feel alone, where every person was seen and valued. Their love was a steady flame, guiding them through darkness and light. They knew the road ahead would have its challenges, but they faced it together, stronger, wiser, and full of hope. The man looked at the woman one evening and said, You gave me freedom, not just from chains, but from fear. For that I am forever grateful." She smiled, squeezing his hand. We found freedom together. Their story was no longer just theirs. It had become a light for many, a reminder that no matter how deep the darkness, love and kindness can always lead the way home. The yo. Ours passed with steady grace, weaving quiet moments of joy and lessons learned. The man and the woman had built a life full of meaning, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. They lived each day with open hearts, aware of how fragile and precious life could be. Their work in the community grew stronger. The Healing Center became a place where people came not only to find help, but to give it. Those who once felt broken began to stand tall, offering their own stories and support to others. The man and the woman watched this transformation with humble pride. One spring morning, the man received a letter that surprised him. It was from someone from his distant past, a person who had once caused pain but now reached out with a wish to make peace. The man shared the letter with the woman, and they talked late into the night about forgiveness and healing. They decided to meet with this person, not to reopen old wounds, but to close them gently. The meeting was quiet and filled with emotion. Old hurts were spoken, tears were shed, and slowly, a new understanding was born. This experience reminded them both of how far they had come and how powerful forgiveness could be. As the seasons changed, the couple found new reasons to be grateful. Their garden bloomed brighter each year, filled with flowers and the buzz of bees. The garden had become a sanctuary, a place where they found peace and connection with the world around them. Visitors often came to the garden, drawn by its beauty and the stories shared there. Children played under the old tree, their laughter a joyful sound that filled the air. The garden was a living symbol of growth, hope, and renewal. Their home was simple but warm. Walls were lined with pictures and mementos from their journey, a reminder of the past and a promise for the future. They found comfort in routines, morning walks, shared meals, quiet evenings by the fire. One day, the woman received a call from a distant city. A group of people wanted to hear their story, to learn from their experiences and to share their own. The man and the woman saw this as an opportunity to spread their message of hope and healing further. They traveled together, meeting new faces, listening to new stories, and sharing their own. Each encounter strengthened their belief in the power of kindness and connection. They realized that no matter where people came from, the need for love and understanding was universal. During one of their visits, they met a young person struggling with fear and loneliness. The man spoke gently, sharing his own journey and reminding the young person that even the darkest times could lead to light. The woman offered words of encouragement, helping the young person see that they were not alone. The moment was simple, but it left a lasting impact on everyone involved. Back home, life continued with its quiet beauty. They worked to build a center that could offer support and healing to anyone who needed it. The center was a dream coming true, a place filled with hope and open arms. On a crisp autumn evening, as the leaves turned gold and red, the man and the woman sat together, reflecting on their journey. They spoke of challenges faced, lessons learned, and dreams yet to be fulfilled. "We have come so far," the man said softly, "and yet there is still so much to do." The woman smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Yes, but we will face it together." Their love was a steady light in a sometimes dark world. It was a light that had guided them through fear, pain, and loneliness, and it was a light they hoped would shine for others as well. Their story was no longer just their own. It had become a beacon for those searching for hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, love and kindness can lead the way home. As the night grew quiet and the stars shone bright, they held each other close, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The gentle flow of life continued to carry the man and the woman forward. Each day brought new experiences, some full of quiet peace, others filled with unexpected lessons. They had learned to listen deeply to one another and to the world around them. This listening became their strength. The community center had grown into a place where healing was shared freely. People from all walks of life came to find support, to tell their stories, or just to sit quietly and feel understood. The man often found himself surprised by the courage others showed, reminding him again and again that no one's journey was the same, but all were connected by a shared hope. The woman's writing had taken on a new depth. She no longer wrote only about their personal story, but about the many lives she encountered through their work. She told stories about people who found light in unexpected places and who discovered strength in vulnerability. Her words touched hearts and inspired change. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, a visitor arrived at their door. She was a woman from a nearby town, carrying her own heavy burdens but seeking a new path. The man and the woman welcomed her with open arms, inviting her to stay and be part of their community. Over the weeks, the visitor found a safe place in their home and at the center. She learned what it meant to trust again, to feel seen and heard without judgment. The man shared his story with her, not as something distant but as a living part of their healing. The woman helped her find her own voice, encouraging her to write and speak her truth. Together, they saw the visitor begin to heal, taking her first steps toward a new life. Their home was filled with warmth and laughter once more. Friends came and went, sharing meals, stories, and dreams. The garden outside bloomed brightly, a symbol of life's endless cycle of growth and renewal. One evening, the man and the woman sat on their porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The night was quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. The man took the woman's hand and smiled. "Do you remember the day we met?" he asked softly. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "I do. It feels like a lifetime ago." He laughed quietly. "It does. And yet it feels like yesterday." They talked about how far they had come, from chains to freedom, from fear to love. Their journey was not perfect, but it was theirs, shaped by every choice and every act of kindness. The woman shared a new idea she had been thinking about, a book that would collect the stories of everyone they had helped. It would be a celebration of healing and hope, a way to remind others that no one was alone. The man loved the idea. "Your words have a way of touching hearts," he said. "We should share them with the world." They began working on the book together, gathering stories, memories, and lessons. It was a labor of love, each page filled with truth and compassion. As the days grew longer, they planned a gathering at the center, a celebration of the community they had built. People came from near and far, bringing food, music, and laughter. The air was filled with joy and gratitude. The man stood before the crowd and spoke quietly but with strength. He told his story, not as a tale of pain, but as a testament to the power of love and forgiveness. The audience listened in silence, many moved to tears. The woman followed, reading from the pages of their book. Her words wove a tapestry of hope, reminding everyone that healing was possible, that every heart could find light. The celebration lasted late into the night, a night filled with connection, stories, and dreams. The man and the woman looked around, grateful for the community that had grown from their courage. The next morning, as the sun rose, they sat together in the garden, feeling the warmth of a new day. They knew their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever lay ahead. Their love had freed them from the chains of the past and had opened a door to a future filled with hope, kindness, and endless possibilities. The man and the woman woke early one morning, greeted by the soft glow of the sunrise. The world outside was calm and quiet, with birds singing and the gentle breeze moving through the trees. They sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets, feeling the peaceful start to a new day. Their life had changed in so many ways since the days when fear held the man like chains. Now those chains were memories, distant yet important reminders of how far they had come. Their love had grown through every trial, every step forward. The community center had become a place where hope was alive. People came seeking healing and left with new strength. The man often found himself moved by the courage he saw in others, the willingness to face pain and reach for light. One morning, as he opened the doors of the center, a young man walked in. His eyes were full of fear but also a quiet hope. The man greeted him warmly, inviting him to sit and share his story. The young man spoke of a life filled with hardship and loneliness. He told of mistakes made and the heavy weight of regret. The man listened carefully, remembering the pain he had once carried. He offered words of encouragement, reminding the young man that the past did not have to define the future. The woman joined them, sharing stories of forgiveness and strength. Together, they helped the young man see that healing was possible and that he was not alone. Days turned into weeks, and the young man began to change. He found friends, took part in workshops, and slowly his fear gave way to hope. The man and the woman watched this transformation with quiet joy, knowing they had helped another soul find freedom. Their garden outside was alive with color. Flowers bloomed and bees moved busily from one blossom to another. The garden had become a symbol of their journey, a place where life grew stronger with care and love. Visitors often stopped by to rest in the garden's shade. Children played, otter filling the air while adults shared stories and dreams. The garden was a reminder that even in the hardest places, life could flourish. One evening, as autumn leaves began to fall, the couple sat by the fire inside their home. The man took the woman's hand and spoke softly about their future. "We have done so much," he said, "but there is still work to be done." She nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Yes, healing is never finished. It moves like a river, always flowing." They talked about ways to expand their work, to reach more people who felt trapped by their past. Ideas flowed. New programs, partnerships with other communities, more stories to tell. The woman dreamed of starting a podcast, a way to share voices from all over, people who had found hope and healing. The man loved the idea. Together, they began planning, excited by the possibilities. As winter approached, the town grew quiet beneath soft blankets of snow. The man and the woman spent long evenings preparing for the new year, filled with hope and new dreams. One cold night, the man stood outside looking up at the stars. The sky was clear, each star shining brightly against the dark. He thought about the journey he had taken, from the mountain to freedom, from fear to love. He felt a deep gratitude for the woman who had whispered words that changed his life forever. She had freed him, not just from chains, but from loneliness and pain. Inside, the woman sat by the fire, writing in her notebook. Her words were gentle and true, telling stories of healing and courage. She felt the same gratitude, knowing that their love was the foundation for everything they had built. The days that followed were filled with purpose. They launched their podcast, inviting guests to share their stories and inspire others. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people touched by their work. The man and the woman continued their mission, knowing that every small step mattered. They held fast to the belief that love, kindness, and understanding could break even the strongest chains. Their story was a living reminder that freedom comes in many forms, not just from physical bonds, but from fear, doubt, and pain. Together, they faced the future with open hearts, ready to meet whatever challenges came their way. The man and the woman awoke to a quiet morning, the air crisp and fresh with the promise of a new day. Outside, the world was beginning to stir. The birds sang softly and the trees swayed gently in the breeze. They sat together at their kitchen table, sipping warm tea, feeling the calmness settle between them. Their life was filled with a peaceful rhythm now, though it had not always been so. Both had traveled long roads, carrying heavy burdens and fears, but their love had become a steady light guiding them forward. The community center had grown into a strong place, filled with people seeking healing and hope. The man often found himself inspired by the courage others showed when facing their own struggles. Each person's story was different, yet they all shared a desire to break free from the chains of pain and fear. One day, a letter arrived from a faraway place. It was from a woman who had heard their story through the podcast the couple had started. She wrote about how their words had touched her heart during a dark time in her life. She thanked them for giving her hope and asked if they might visit her town to share their message in person. The man and the woman talked about the letter for hours. They felt honored and excited by the chance to reach new people who might need their help. They began making plans to travel, eager to bring their stories and support to another community. Before the trip, the couple spent time preparing. They gathered materials, wrote new stories, and thought deeply about how best to connect with those they would meet. Their work was more than just sharing their past. It was about creating a space where others could feel safe to heal. The day of the journey finally arrived. They packed their bags and said goodbye to their garden, the flowers blooming bright in the morning sun. The man looked back at their home, feeling a mix of excitement and hope. When they reached the new town, they found a community much like their own. People carried the weight of difficult experiences, but also held a quiet hope for change. The man and the woman were welcomed warmly, and soon they began sharing their story. The woman spoke about the power of kindness and connection, reminding everyone that healing is a journey taken together. The man shared his own struggles and the freedom he found through love and forgiveness. Many in the audience were moved to tears. They saw reflections of their own pain and dreams in the couple's words. After the talks, people approached them with questions, stories, and gratitude. The couple stayed for several days, meeting individuals one-on-one and leading group discussions. They helped people find small steps toward healing, offering tools and encouragement. One afternoon, a young person approached the woman quietly. They shared how difficult it was to believe in a better future, weighed down by fear and doubt. The woman listened with care, then offered gentle words. "Hope is like a small seed," she said softly. "It takes time to grow, but with patience and care it will bloom." The young person smiled faintly, feeling seen and understood. It was a simple moment, but one that carried deep meaning. The man and the woman also explored the town together, visiting parks, cafes, and quiet places. They talked about their dreams for the future, how they wanted to help more people find freedom from their own chains. Each night, they wrote notes and reflections, capturing the lessons learned from the community. Their hearts were full, knowing that their journey was making a difference. When it was time to return home, they felt grateful for the experience and the connections made. The trip had reminded them that no matter where you are, the human heart seeks the same things: love, understanding, and freedom. Back in their own town, life returned to its gentle pace. The garden bloomed with renewed beauty, and the community center continued to be a place of healing. The man and the woman carried the new stories and hope with them, weaving them into their ongoing work. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, the woman turned to the man and said, "Our journey is never really over, is it?" He shook his head gently. "No. Healing moves like a river, always flowing, always changing." They smiled, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Their love, born in struggle and strengthened through kindness, was the true freedom they had always sought.